So tell us about rural media. Tell us a little bit. I might need to know even as the day goes on.
Well, we're a 25-year-old media production charity that endeavours to bring change through participation and access in media, creative arts, etc.
Something tells me you said that before.
I have. I'm now looking to my left just to fulfil creative function, and my brain is going over there. We give voice to people who otherwise go unheard.
Yeah.
That's our remit.
And what sort of people are they?
Well, we have a big connection to the GRT community, which is the last bastion of accepted racism in the UK and often around the world. So we do a lot of work with them. We publish Travellers' Times, numerous documentaries, but also rural communities in general.
Yeah.
Herefordshire has got 180,000 people, and about 20% of it is the most disconnected in the country.
Right. Okay. I mean, we sort of felt that a little bit driving here. That it's not. There's no highway to Herefordshire as such. No. We were driving. Are you all right, Rick?
Rick, my namesake.
Yeah. This is Rick on camera at the moment. Everything okay? Yeah. Anyway, so I mean, I guess what direction? I mean, I'm quite interested and intrigued by the kind of racism, the GRT racism, as you said. It's kind of acceptable still to be racist to Romani people. I mean, is that something that's changing? I mean, we've certainly felt it going around. Hello, come and take a seat. So far, we've got Rich, we've got Rick. Does your name begin with R?
It's Rebecca.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. So, Rick, Rich, Rebecca, welcome to Talkaoke. I don't know if you know Rick from Rural Media.
That's Rick from...
Oh, Rich from Rural Media. Oh, okay. There's too many R's. And this is Rick from The People Speak. And I'm Mikey from The People Speak. At the moment, we're talking about the GRT community.
GRT community.
Yeah. Do you know what that is?
Absolutely no idea.
Okay.
Gypsy Roma Traveller.
And what Rich is saying is that it is the last bastion of acceptable. Somehow, it's acceptable to be racist towards gypsies or travelling people. And we're just sort of like, just as a sort of starter, just as a kind of soft starter for the Talkaoke, we're just kind of trying to, chew down on why that is, why that's acceptable. And why that happens.
I say, go with the microphone. I do love this format already, because there is a perception that it is we're testing a lifestyle choice rather than a genuine ethnicity, just because it's not necessarily on the surface. It's not skin colour.
Yeah.
So there is a devaluing of their ethnic heritage and culture, because people think that it isn't as valid as, say, your traditional BAME minorities, Black, Asian.
Yeah.
So it's making people realise also that there is the amount of so-called assimilation is much higher, and so gypsy people can live in houses and do, but most people assume they don't.
Yeah.
And it's a small, like with any community, a small minority who get bad press.
Rebecca, do you agree? To begin with, I mean, do you know? Are you from around here?
I am. I know gypsy people of a gypsy background from all different parts of the country, though, and actually, I think they all have experienced in some way, at least, a lack of understanding of what they're all about.
Yeah. Okay.
So.
And Rick.
Yeah, I mean, when I used to work in Bournemouth, there was a lot of hatred towards gypsies, but I think there was a lot of crime was blamed on gypsy communities.
Right.
And I worked in a place that had a lot of metal.
Yeah.
And it was and when it went missing, they blamed it on gypsies.
Okay.
Basically.
So when
as a fellow beard wearer, I would like someone to tell Rick that he's got a little bit of white caught in his bit there. It's your piercing. Yeah. See, now you've touched it. I can see.
Is there a lot of discrimination against people in the piercing community?
Yeah, I don't think I'm quite on the piercing level of some people, though, to be honest.
Yeah. Have you got any other piercings?
No, not yet.
No,
anyway.
Okay, just wondered.
Is there a community version of asking someone if they're pregnant? Is it something you should never do? Basically, if I just found a new area you shouldn't.
I don't know. I've not experienced it much enough.
I mean, I would always, when it comes to, if you meet someone with a North American accent, it's always best to assume that they are Canadian, because if Canadians seems to be more offended at being thought of as American, and likewise, if you see someone and you're not sure if they're fat or pregnant, always best to go for fat, because if they're pregnant, they'll just think it's funny.
I have actually done. I have
Yeah.
real life experience of doing that.
Yeah.
Because when my wife was expecting our first child, and of course you're going to classes, prenatal classes, and so you're surrounded by lots of women who are pregnant.
Yeah.
It sort of
You just assume that
resets my context.
Yeah.
And I was in a bar in Camden,
Yeah.
and I was served by this particular waitress, and you can come in, Jamie.
Come in.
And I said that. I said, so when I did say, when were you expecting? And she wasn't. And I've never been so mortally offended on her behalf.
Yeah.
And I could have crawled into a hole and died. And I decided I was a misogynist. It must be, because how could I have said that? And it was awful.
Okay, all right. So I don't know if we want to go there, but I guess once you've set that level, then you kind of expanded your ability, your faux pas ability that far. That means everything else is kind of okay. And that'd be good training in a way for being a Talkaoke host, but sometimes you do get things wrong.
She's lowered her opinion of me now.
Are you shocked, Rebecca?
Horrified.
Yeah.
No, I think it happens all the time, and I think actually people have to be have a bit of a sense of humour about it. You can't take everything really, really seriously. It's more of a reflection on where they are if they are really offended.
Yeah. Certainly in the arts, I think there's something written here, something about failure. You have to be allowed to fail. So maybe in conversations you have to be allowed to fail as well. Conversational failures, that's what we're talking about now. Have you ever had any conversational failures?
I'm trying to think of, I probably had loads, but I can't think of one on top of my head. But.
Yeah, I certainly have. My big problem is recognising people, because, believe it or not, even though I've kind of got it wrong already today, I'm actually quite good at remembering people's names around the table, but then come tomorrow, I would just not only forget everybody's names, but everybody's faces as well. And that's my continual source of conversation.
I always recognise faces, always, but do have problems with names increasingly. Yeah. So and this goes with my theory about lots of people who would say they never see any celebrities. Yeah. And I say no, they're around.
I'm completely celebrity blind actually. I once elbowed my way in front of Keira Knightley at a bar. And it's
she
pints,
is
please.
Very slender.
Yeah, she's very small, very easy to push in front of, actually.
I had a perfect example, an absolutely brilliant
Yeah.
illustration of this. I was having a conversation with a flatmate, or at an event at what's now the BFI South Bank. Literally, he was saying, I never see famous people. Yeah. And in the corner of my eye, Eddie Izzard is walking. And he's saying, I don't know. I mean, maybe you just, you move in different circles because you're a journalist and things. And he actually said, excuse me, and walked between us. And I'm going... and my flatmate said, I just don't see him. I'm like...
Maybe Eddie Izzard's not famous enough. I don't
clearly.
know. Yeah. Any famous people here today? What was he going to say?
No, I would have thought Eddie Izzard would be quite recognisable. But anyway, it depends. Was he in drag or not in drag?
I can't remember actually whether he was in drag. I guess.
Who's the most famous person here today, would you say? Who's the biggest star?
No idea.
No?
Yes.
I wasn't fishing. No, I'm just the humble microphone porter in the middle of this table. Where's this conversation going to go? Are we going to talk about celebrity? Do we need celebrity to drive the arts? We're talking about digital media. Do we want to go back to the faux pas?
I think celebrity has a big part to play in the demise of television, particularly, in that a lot of the time you need a celebrity or someone well known on board before you can even pitch a program.
Right.
And actually some big names attached to something really terrible could make it do better than something really good that didn't have a big name.
Right, so it kind of lamifies television. Do you agree? Rich?
I'd argue historically it's a thing that's as old as any form of entertainment.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think if it is eroded television, and I find that hard to pass PARSE because of the huge shift in televisual consumption.
So what you're saying, you don't watch it or you don't understand?
Well, no, generally because of the change of model, I don't know if I could honestly assess if celebrity had degraded it because for everything that's degraded.
Is it pre-degraded? That's what you're saying. Yeah.
Well, I think the modes, I think that the sort of soup model that currently exists, where it's very hard to know what's where and what's good and what's not, because there's so many different channels supplying you with content. Yeah. I think that as sort of, well, it's done both. In some ways, it's degraded a lot of it, but it has also elevated a lot of material. But that's because of money.
I do agree. I think perhaps I misspoke. Perhaps it's not just television then, it's commissioning. In a lot of the time when something is looking to be commissioned, it goes for the whatever name is involved, rather than looking at something that they could then perhaps attach someone to.
Yeah. I mean, are you involved in television, filmmaking, media making?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, I'm a camera assistant and aspiring all sorts of things. But
Right. Okay. And does that kind of frustration, is that born out of what kind of projects?
It's more born out of the fact that I consume a lot of media. Right. So every day I watch hours and hours of moving image. Yeah. And so I feel like I have a pretty widespread understanding of different parts of it.
I mean, does it change your perception of media and video that you watch, sort of being behind the camera as well? Does it actually change the way you see TV?
I absolutely think it changes the way I look at, because I work specifically in camera as well. I think I read a film now rather than watch it. Yeah. So I look at where the lights probably were and what they're trying to make me feel.
Okay.
So.
Interesting. So we're talking about how sort of being behind the camera changes your perception of watching films and TV. And Rick?
Well, I do a bit of video editing as well, and it drives my girlfriend mad when I watch things, and I watch it from an editing point of view, and just sort of pick up things, and she's just like, shut up, I'm just trying to enjoy the film.
So you can't switch off the editor?
Sometimes, if it's a good film and it's well edited, you don't see it, and you just instantly.
So it's more the bad editing.
Or very obvious bits that sort of stick out.
If something's working, I don't analyse it. Yeah. I mean, one advantage I've got is I'm a very quick post hoc analyzer of films and TV films especially. So it may seem to a lot of people in conversation afterwards that I've been sitting there analysing the film, but it's just I've just done it after. Because if the film's working, also that people have an interesting expectation, because I'm quite gobby, that as soon as a film's finished, if it's a good film I really love, all I'm going to want to do is talk about it. Whereas in fact it's the reverse. Yeah. If a film's great, I sit there and I don't want to talk about it, and I don't want to hear other people talking about it, because I don't need that.
Yeah. So it's more that when it goes wrong, it's not working.
Not even wrong. Yeah, if something's, boredom is the biggest crime. Because then my brain goes, and then.
Okay. So.
I would say the same. Yeah. I recently started reviewing I say reviewing. I make glib quips after I watch films on this website, and. The longest ones are the ones that were not. There was something just a bit off about them, and they were a bit long, and they were a bit boring, and then I have so much nitpicky stuff to complain about. Right. But if it was really good, I'm just like, well
that's
done.
Good. Go and watch
Congrats.
it. Okay. So this is Talkaoke Pop-Up Talk Show. You probably know that. We've got Rick, we've got Rich, we've got Rebecca.
Got Peter.
Can I call you Repeater?
Repeater. We've got
just
Repeater.
Sort of like,
Repeater.
Yeah. Just to
bang.
To add to the then you're
you can
someone
call me
that begins with an R.
whatever you like.
Yeah. Okay. At the moment we're talking about it's kind of like, does working in some kind of media or working in film change your view or the way that you see television or film or whatever? Does it actually? It seems like right now if it's a bad film or a bad bit of TV, a bad bit of media, then it does. But if it's a good bit, then you kind of are able to sort of like hold off on that critical. I don't know. Are you involved in media?
Yeah. So I make films. So I'm a filmmaker. I found it for quite a while really hard to watch films actually, but I think increasingly I've been able to sort of distance myself from that kind of critical world. It depends on the film. If you get immersed in it, you can get But I still like kind of thinking film, I guess.
Yeah. What does that mean, thinking in film?
Just something that sort of challenges you, or something that makes you look at someone's life a slightly different way to what you were expecting. You
so
don't
you
see
kind of
many
think of
those,
people's lives
really.
as a sort of film.
Yeah, I
Do you
think
have the
so.
dramatic music and stuff like incidental music going on in your head when you just have?
All about the music.
Have you got music going on
It
now?
starts with the
Yeah,
music,
yeah.
film for me.
Yeah.
People always think of film as a visual medium. It's not at all. It's about immersing you in a sound thing, I think. For me, film ideas always start with music, actually.
Okay.
Everyone love Baby Driver.
Yeah.
Because I'm not a huge fan of Baby Driver, but I can see the appeal of it, because if you are filmic and you at any point had, well, I would have said a Walkman when I was younger, any music to plug in your ears, you do precisely what he portrayed. So the thing he did, whether or not I think it's a good film or not, he tapped into that.
Don't spoil it because Rick's not seen it yet. I don't know about Rebecca. You've seen it, okay, yeah.
It tapped into that
Yeah.
experience of anyone who loves film and music.
I would say though, sorry to talk about it,
Yeah.
and you haven't seen it. I found the filming of it incredibly gimmicky,
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
sound of it was
Is
great.
that because you're a camera person? And
Well, maybe, yeah. And I'd seen so much online because it's got these prolonged sequences, which is just steady cam, and all these people who don't know about film are like, oh, it's amazing, how did they do that, wow.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, well, why? It feels like an advert, you know?
It's like a sort of 90-minute long ad. Was it 90 minutes long?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone was saying, we're getting into opinion now, but everyone was saying how revolutionary it was, and I didn't understand that. Because I said, if you've watched MTV at all, when you've seen what he's doing.
Yeah.
And there was a big thing about how they had an editor on set editing the sequences as they went, and they went to great lengths to do that. And personally, I think that was a somewhat wasted effort.
Right, okay.
Because I think you could have done the same result with the same footage, with the same music after the fact, and maybe it wouldn't have tethered it quite so heavily to that technique.
Maybe it was cheaper to have the editor.
No. No, more money, another person.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess where do we want to go with this? We want to talk about Baby Driver, how we see films through a different lens.
Rick, you're an editor. Would you be interested in being on set for edits?
It's a very good question.
Being on set for
Have you ever
edits?
been on set at a film shoot, editing live?
Kind of.
Yeah.
In a very mental way, yes.
Yeah.
A very rough edit.
Can you explain?
It is.
Yeah.
But explain that.
Yeah.
Can I explain that project?
All right, just go. No, just go. Just,
And it is sometimes good seeing, if you can. It depends what. I mean, a lot of the time I'm filming stuff. I'm editing stuff that's kind of like Vox Pops a lot of the time, like short videos that are going to go online. So it's kind of good to see what the event is that I've been at, what it is, and so you get a feel for the event and feel what for the people at it. So it's good to be there.
in a way, it's good to be there.
But I guess for a film, in a film environment, it's probably different. I think because it's good to be removed from the craziness.
Yeah.
As well, sometimes it depends what you're editing.
Okay. If it's a crazy film, maybe it's better to be there.
Like you don't want to get like you see like I don't know if you're starting seeing like the actors being knobheads in the background or something like that offset and stuff like that. You're gonna it might influence your way of editing it or something like that. You know.
So in a way, we're back to the celebrities. Don't
switch yourself. You have to kind of then switch yourself up and just go into the edit.
Don't you? Actors are cattle to be moved around.
Okay, Peter.
I mean, with editing, I mean, I think if you're too involved with the whole process, you just don't see it for what it is. And I think having that eye that can come in and just see it in a different way, to what you think you captured on set. They say a film's like written 3 times. It's once in the script, once on the set, and once in the edit. And I think having that extra eye, I think it's really important. Whenever I edit stuff that I've shot, it's not ever as good as it could be.
So you think actually having a different eye as well as a, not just a extra right, but by a different person.
Yeah, I think so. And you often, you get directors who have their editors, don't you? And they know that person's going to be sort of critical, and they're going to work together, sort of as one vision. But
it's about working with what you actually have. An editor is not. If an editor comes onto a project wasn't on the shoot, they're working with the actual existing products, material you have to work with, rather than the idealized notion of what you're trying to make, which is why everyone craves to be. A lot of people crave to be writer, director, producer, because it means they can try and do all of that. But So arguably, you might lose the singular vision at each stage, but equally, you might get too stuck in the mud.
Rick, have you got a view on this?
I was just going to say, I hate editing anything I've kind of shot.
Yeah,
I always prefer editing someone else's film.
Yeah, then you can blame somebody else.
Well, no, but I mean, also, maybe I'm not a good cameraman then.
Okay, I mean, maybe you're supposed to be doing Talkaoke. You know, where are the people? We need people to do Talkaoke.
I thought today was all about just being in the main, just whatever happens, get a few conversations going, spark something off.
These lot behind you have just been very, very quiet. So it's just like.
Yeah, I might go and sit with them in a second, just to be. Yeah, they must feel quite ignored.
Yeah, they've got some of them have got slightly sort of weary-looking faces, I suppose.
Putting them all around the table and you know, you're just sitting really quiet still for a little while when someone comes in and then just move and talk and something like that.
You should ask the artists if you can get them around the table actually.
Yeah, that'd be good.
That'd be awesome. That'd be amazing. So.
Yeah, well, then if they could be potentially animated whilst that happens, and that would be quite good. I've never done it. I've never done a Talkaoke with puppets.
Well, 90% of communication is non-verbal, isn't it? So
exactly.
Maybe they are communicating.
They could at least nod. That'll make me feel better. Can nod and just come lean forward when a point gets made. I think that could work. Yeah. I mean, a lot of what's happening here, Rick, it's not about the words, but about the body language. Yeah, it's about the flow. Yeah. So it could work. It could work. Find out. But hello. Somebody. Hello. Come on, have a stick. Come on. Anyway, we've got a new face to table. What's your name?
Elle.
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 We've got Peter, we've got Rick, I'm Mikey. At the moment, let's talk Talkaoke. We can talk about whatever. It's kind of up to you, but we were talking about seeing the. You look like you're shaping up to.
I was just thinking. We were talking about these guys over here and what they're thinking. You know who they are, what they're about. I don't know. If you have any, we had absolutely no revelations whatsoever, apart from the fact that maybe they could contribute. Maybe we should bring them in here and get them to speak for themselves rather than talking about.
Yeah, well, maybe we could project onto them what we think they're going to say. You know, the moment my issue with them is they don't look excited enough. Do you know what I mean? They're sort of like, especially the second one along there. It looks a bit.
Something.
Yeah, exactly. That's all right. Well, just we can. There we go.
As a man of heft, that's just put the fear in me.
Don't worry, you're fine, you're good.
I would reckon that Pervin has deliberately made them deliberately neutral,
Yeah.
so that there's allows for people to project on and whatever the performers are doing with them.
Yeah.
It means they can do whatever they want with them. Whereas if there's a fixed expression, then you're limited to what you can do.
Well, I mean, maybe we could combine this with the previous conversation that we were having about film and how we see film, because we have a lot of filmmakers around the table, camera people, editors. And do you actually project your own sort of view, your own practice onto that film, and kind of, you're Rick over here is an editor, so when he especially if it's a bad film, he's going, it's like actually changes his view of the film. So maybe it's the same with puppetry as well. You're a filmmaker as well, Elle?
I am, yes. I'm primarily I work as an editor. But I do like camera work as well, freelance more.
A couple of questions. If you shoot something, does that make it less nice for you to edit it, or does it make it nicer to edit it if you shot it yourself?
I personally prefer not to shoot it because then you're too biased towards it.
Yeah. That is what Rick said as well. If Rick is editing something, he doesn't want to...
I don't like my own footage, so it's probably hit.
Yeah. We don't like our own footage. It's interesting. But the second question, just to bring you up to speed, is does that knowledge about film and filmmaking change the way you look at films?
Definitely. I don't think you can watch a film and not analyse it once you know what's going on behind the scenes.
Does that make it worse in a way because you can't just sit and relax?
Yeah, it makes it hard to just enjoy something.
Yeah.
Sometimes, yeah.
Okay, so we've all, in a way, apart from me, everyone around the table was all kind of like, kind of open up the box and they can't just watch film in an innocent way.
It's added sound effects that always drive me mad as well. I always spot them too much, like horse sound effects. It's far too many.
Hate the
it's
horse
just
sound
thrown
effects.
in so many times, and they're all the same library that's just used again, a lot of the time anyway.
Footsteps, Foley footsteps.
Yeah.
The gravel, because I know, if you study it anyway, you can't just do this. You're meant to have a slight, because
like a gravelly sort of thing.
And so when they overdo, because having filmed on a gravel beach recently, didn't we, in Brighton, you can't use that real sound because it's incredibly loud.
Yeah.
So it's just like, oh, come on,
Yeah.
So
actually, a real footstep sound doesn't work. It has to be. I guess the public's also used to the Foley sound of a footstep.
It wouldn't be recorded.
Yeah.
I saw some sound guys speaking at a conference, and they were doing some work around this and how our sort of cultural perception of sound changes what sound is. So like a jungle doesn't sound like a jungle because it's all that, but we're so used to what a jungle is represented to sound like bloody blah. And it's like, I don't know if you've seen there's an episode of The Simpsons where they're painting horses to look like cows, and because cows don't look like cows on screen, and it sort of captures that idea. So how that then creates our reality, which then feeds back, is quite fascinating.
So
I think
film feeds into our reality more than reality does.
I'd say so.
Yeah. You agree?
I do agree.
Have you ever painted a horse to look like a cow?
I haven't. I've seen a horse
on
painted as a zebra, though.
Right, okay. Why did they do that?
Mexico.
Okay. All right. It sounds like, what's his called? Jodorowsky, whatever he's called. Mike. Jodorowsky.
No, I was going to say that this is a very Baudrillardian conversation. Yeah. The signifier, the image dictating the real world, art dictating life.
Yeah.
The signifier taking control from the real.
Okay. So film informs our reality, which changes our reality, not the other way around. It's not the mirror, but the shaper of the realities. Any other examples of that? Do people agree with that? That actually we come to expect things as we've seen them in film? Has anyone here ever been to a jungle and been disappointed by the sounds that they heard there? This doesn't sound right. Where's the real jungle? Yeah.
There was a study I looked into during my dissertation, and it was looking at how...
Come in.
So
we've got chargers.
Film was influencing how your mind sort of perceives and functions, and it was looking at the memoirs of soldiers back before cinema, and these memoirs of soldiers who were diagnosed with post-traumatic stress didn't have flashbacks, and it was only until flashbacks was used in cinema as a narrative that humans started having flashbacks as a symptom of this. So it was interesting how cinemas influenced all of that.
There was a study which showed for decades people dreamed in black and white.
Right. Is that because of
watching black and white? Yeah,
really?
On TV. And then once everything came back into colour, everyone went back to dreaming in colour.
Right, okay. So the black and white dreaming thing was down to black and white technology. Okay. Will people start to dream in VR? Will they be doing this in their sleep? Any thoughts on that? Anyone around the table?
I don't have any thoughts on that yet, but there's a really interesting phrase which goes something like, I was a man dreaming that I was a butterfly, or am I a butterfly dreaming that I'm a man? And that idea that actually we don't know, and this is the Baudrillardian thing, we don't really know, I did see an article in the news this week where scientists have proven that we don't live in a simulation, but it's all that.
But that was really funny. That came up when I was at Stag Do, of all things. They started talking. It's a big load of geeky people.
You're at a Stag Do, just having a discussion about whether you live in a simulation or not.
Well, we're very geeky group.
That sounds like a geeky stag do.
And it was funny because everyone was going, "Oh, well, isn't it kind of cooler if we're in a simulation?" And from my point of view, I said it's no different from any creation myth. It's no different from wondering about God, because we're living it. If it's a simulation or not.
Does it matter? Okay, so we've got a new face to the table. We have got Elle, we've got Peter, we've got Rich and Rick, and my name is Mikey. What's your name?
I'm Maddie.
Maddie. Yeah. At the moment, we're kind of we sort of started talking about. There's a lot of filmmakers around the table. Make of that what you will. But their problem is they can't sit down and watch TV or film without, seeing it through the camera lens or as an editor. But then we kind of moved on from that, from the fact that actually that film kind of dictates our reality. Like when we go to the jungle, we expect it to sound like the jungle that we see on TV, but it doesn't. Well, I don't know. I've never been to the jungle, so I don't know. But you can imagine, you know what I'm talking about. So now, we're talking about, do we actually live in a simulation? Some scientists say yes, other scientists say no. Some have proved it, some have disproved it. That's where we are right now. I don't know if any of those subjects at all. Do any of those strike a chord with you?
Well, I think that we're completely conditioned into ways of thought through the media, through media devices, through film, and it gives us an observation, and it does apply a screen to the way that we observe the rest of the world. Even the way that we relate to each other in terms of personal relationships is dictated by our phones at the moment. I mean, me and my boyfriend have only just made it Facebook official, and people didn't even know of my existence, even though he talks about me every day, until I was confirmed on the internet two years later.
So this is social media, actually.
That's it's social media, but we're also we relate to ourselves in comparison to what we see on movie screens. So our relationships don't seem validated until we go on dates, or all of those elements of.
So the kind of pathway of what a relationship, how it begins, how it continues, is all determined by the norm set by films. Do people agree with that?
I suspect it might be going sort of a stage further than that, and that, the real world's actually just becoming material for that other world actually that exists in that kind of spaces potentially. Kind of a really good example. So I was travelling a few years ago, and there was a bunch of younger people than me, and we were on this tour of some island in Australia, and they were just sleeping the whole way through. And every time we stopped to get off at a place, they all got really energetic. Stood, did the posy photo, click, back on the bus to sleep, and didn't really experience or see the whatever. But it was kind of, for me, that was just really fascinating, just to see that
so
kind of
literally. The documentation is more important than the reality.
The documentation is more important than
the ultimate. Anyone ever read the Dan Simmons book Hyperion?
I know it.
So it's written in the 1990s and very prescient in terms of the internet. It's omniscience, and our reliance on it. Ultimately, it's internalized. And as the two things do that, if the real world is simply providing fodder for the digital world, and our real lives are just organic use for the digital avatar, then once the technology goes inside the brain and everything is simulcast constantly, then the two things might cross again. But until that happens, there's this split. It's like concerts. Are people not aware that these are cameras and there's a memory here, and this is a way of communicating it?
Gigs, when I go to a music gig and there's just everyone's filming it. Even the gig is being filmed as well, professionally filmed, and everyone's got cameras up. But
what is going on? So, there must be something extra happening if that is being filmed anyway. That the actual filming process then becomes a kind of way of experience.
Does anyone know anyone that films a concert and then watches it?
No, so it's actually about the filming of the filming something is doing something. We've got some. Are you a filmmaker as well? Just to add to the mix.
I dabble in in moving image. I'm not necessarily a filmmaker. I think there's a massive difference between the two. But I think that in terms of there's a really nice piece of theoretical text, and Alan Watts talks around it, and it's basically about the documentation as confirmation of your existence. People at the minute always feel like they have to be affirmed in what they're doing, and try and find like minds that agree with them. And so this filming, and maybe if you're even not engaged, it's just to say, I was here.
So that's kind of almost almost the kind of legalistic confirmation that you were there. You were at the concert. You were there when it happens. So maybe that's what it's about.
we're all scared of it. It's our own mortality, isn't it? And I think it's that kind of to exist in that world is like, we have to, I don't know.
I mean, we're uploading this and we'll be, that will confirm everyone that we were here. This was a real moment because it will be online. That's true, isn't it, Rick? You're nodding.
Yes.
Yes. But I mean, where are we going with this reality? Is this just like, you were talking about it mixing together? Is that just where where we'll be? Is this just going to become the new normal, that we'll just video ourselves all the time?
We're already on a path, and again, that book, I'd recommend reading it if anyone's pondering it.
Just say it again, was it?
Hyperion, Dan Simmons. It's being turned into a film. It will not cover the content. But it's positive.
Just like everything else.
Yeah, the AI gains sentience, and then there's and they decide that they've got to end the human race, and the easiest way to do that is just to unplug us. Because we're lost. Because there's the ultimate conceit of that is that they developed this sort of thing called farcasting, which allows you to travel faster than light from different place to different place. And it's got to the point, in the same way that our culture is now, where technology, instead of being outward facing, like it was in the 60s when we were going to the moon, it's turned inward. And so that same technology to travel infinite distances becomes people having different rooms in their houses on different planets.
Right.
So literally, once that system's turned off, they can be stranded on a volcanic plateau with no way of escaping because they have that in their house as a figure wall.
Right.
And it's to me, that seems like a very sort of physicalized version of what's happening now, which is that we're in a place where the fear of missing out is maximized. And if it's the tree falling in the wood analogy, if a tree falls in the wood, does it make a sound?
Yeah. Now.
And does anyone give a shit?
If the tree falls in the and you don't capture it on your
someone
smartphone.
Someone doesn't like it and someone doesn't share it.
Yeah.
Is it?
Okay. Well, how do people feel about this? Do they feel?
I definitely think there's like a massive sense of validation people seek for. Like that's why you post pictures of yourself. Like people take selfies. Like the only reason you're posting that is because you want people to tell you look nice. And like the only reason you film things is because you want people to think you did something good and you did something amazing. Like you're not doing things anymore for yourself. You're doing it for validation so that you can feel like you're
But who's that validation for?
I guess it's just for like, you seek it from like through social media. And I guess it's just to make yourself feel like that you have a purpose. I guess maybe related to like self-purpose and self-worth.
Okay, so it's about self-worth, but it's validation by others to give ourselves worth. If you take a selfie and nobody likes it, was it really there? Okay, so I mean, we've kind of sketched out what this kind of social media media world looks like. We're kind of there now. What do we do about it? How do we find our way through it, I guess, is the next question. Is it always going to be that way? No. Are we just move?
There's actually a lot of people at the minute who are disconnecting. There's a lot of people who are removing themselves from it because it's not a real interaction. It's not a real like relationship with anyone. And there's a girl in my course at the minute. She's studying her masters and she's looking at.
She's studying what? Sorry.
She's studying her masters in fine art.
Okay. Yeah.
But she's looking at how it's basically a hierarchical like setup where the person with the most likes is obviously the most popular, but there's people that actually use it in an attempt to cry out for help, and the digital realm doesn't really offer that. It's like it's all about our self gratification really, and about our addiction to our own like personalities, but there's a lot of people who've started to cotton onto that and remove themselves from Facebook and remove themselves from Instagram because they know that they're addicted to this device that's just taking away their soul and destroying their communities and their families.
What are they actually? When it comes to alcoholism or drug addiction, you kind of know what the hit is.
It's the same. There's a study, I can't remember the source, that it releases the similar amount of endorphin activity.
Right.
And serotonin.
But what is actually giving you the endorphin hit?
Seeking the validation, the hits.
So every time you get a notification, ding, that's just like a drug.
It triggers an endocrinic and then neurological response.
Yeah. Relate to that because anytime like I have like someone comments on something like that I've said and they're like agreeing with something or they're saying something, like it makes you feel good because it means people are deliberately choosing to interact with you. Yeah. But I do think social media, like, it gets a lot of bad rep, but I mean, social media's been amazing for me to connect because I had family over in Canada, and like things like Snapchat, like I could see her and I could see her little twin sisters. Like I got to watch them grow up, and I got to watch my brother get engaged to her and things like that, which I never would have because they're halfway across the world. So if it wasn't for immediate things like Snapchat and like Facebook Messenger, like I wouldn't have ever been able to be as like informed and in touch and feel as part of their real life.
Communication is good. I mean, I would agree with that. And
can you be addicted to like real life? Like if, say, for example, someone interacts with you here now, and like we're interacting, are we getting the same addiction? Are we getting the same hit?
No, but social media is a simulacra of socialization, and all socialization is based on mirroring. We learn who we are and our behaviors and what we like, what we don't like, what people like about us through people's reactions to us. That is an inbuilt cognitive response that grows and develops and becomes more complex, but essentially is wired into us. Social media in the digital realm is simulating that. But the difference is there's all sorts of holistic balances within the human body and the experience that this experience. So, for instance, if you were having a flirtatious encounter with somebody, on like you've got all of the build-up of tension with no catharsis, and catharsis can just be that. And that removal is. So it creates all of it. So if adrenaline is a spike, right, but cortisone the stress hormone is a
more smooth kind of like
it's an exponential rise, but it needs to be actively broken down to get it out of your system. That's why stress is a problem, because you can't just adrenaline comes and goes. So you get hyped up and then it goes, but cortisol goes up and up and up. Social media human interaction is like cortisol.
It's sort of building you up
without any catharsis, without any natural release. So there are cues, visual, subtle, that you get. So someone said to me, "What about Skype? When that's face to face, it is, but again, you'd be amazed. Skype's that, and it's."
The act of doing the thing through a machine makes it a very different thing, I think, and that kind of it's like the difference between a fighter pilot. Flying over Iraq and dropping a bomb to someone with a drone based in San Francisco. Actually, that physical knowing there's probably a school near down there. That must do something to make that interaction thingy. So I think it's that empathy and that kind of when our communications are being mediated through a device or through a thing, that there's always the danger with distance from the implication of the kind of thing itself, and that can be really problematic, and that's why people who are perfectly reasonable, rational, or people in real life are bullying people or sexist online or kind of it's kind of, it just wouldn't happen in a face-to-face conversation.
Like trolls or whatever, like on Twitter and YouTube, saying like such horrible things, and like to the point where they're telling people to go and kill themselves. And it is like you would never say that to a face, but you've got such a detachment because you're anonymous or you're through a screen, and they're no longer a person that you're talking to. They're just a machine that you're talking to.
Responsibility. There's a group tendency among group dynamics, the mob mentality, which is diffusion of responsibility. So your usual sense of norm, social, what's acceptable and what's not. And I think that even though everyone stresses social media as being an individualistic medium, when you're commenting, I think you perceive yourself as being part of the mob.
Right.
Because you are part of your commenter, and everyone who comments, so that relieves you of certain moral and principles and ideas, I think, and changes where you sit in the strata, whereas it would be much harder to do that face to face.
I mean, is it all a question of, because I think what I'm picking up from you, Peter, is a question of safety as well. Like the drone pilot is in a safer situation than the fighter pilot.
It's a matter of dehumanization, isn't it? There was a study that was conducted by a student who was doing a PhD who came in to give us a talk, and it said that the drone cameras, the cameras that are applied to drones, although they could be the highest spec and the best definition, actually pixelate their victims. They pixelate what exactly it is they're trying to land the bomb on, because
is that a design feature?
It's a design feature so that you are desensitized, so that you don't you don't realize that you're harming a person. It's and that's what we experience with the digital all the time. It's this desensitization and dehumanization of others and of ourselves. In fact, we sort of feel like immortalized on the internet, and so we don't really challenge ourselves to learn anything new or to put ourselves in a situation that we might not like, because we don't have to. Essentially, we can tailor our experience to all of our own desires.
Okay, and we've got new face to the table. So we've got Maddie, we've got Elle, we've got Peter, we've got Rich. I'm Mikey. What's your name? Claire. At the moment, well, I mean, I don't know how much you know about Talkaoke or anybody around the table. In fact, it's a pop-up talk show where you talk about whatever people want to talk about, kind of based on a sort of consensus. And we started off talking about, because we've got a lot of filmmakers around the table, so we started off talking about, do we actually see the world different if we are filmmakers, or if we editors, camera people, whatever, we actually start to see the films differently. But then the point was made, actually, film itself makes us see the world differently, because we've got expectations about the world that we've come to from film. For example, in the black and white era, more people would dream in black and white, apparently. Well, I'm not here to do true and not true. I'm just ideas. But then we talked about... Yeah, exactly. Possibly we are. But anyway, we've sort of moved on even further from that. And now we're talking about how social media actually kind of informs the way our social life happens. And are we all kind of addicted to this platform? And is it creating these kind of very distorted social... You're not addicted? So that's kind of like where we are. And then we started talking about, I don't know if you, as you came, we're talking about the drone pilots. Are they actually, when they kind of press the button to send a missile down, are they actually detached from that space? Is it about a safety? Is it about a kind of pixelation of our reality?
I started experiencing PTSD. I think so. I think there's been kind of increasing instances of them suffering from PTSD. It's finally landing what they're doing.
Is that sort of a bit delayed because of they're so separated from...
I don't know, I just heard it.
Yeah. It's another idea that's just floating that could be confirmed or denied.
There was actually a very, very... there was like a very facetious sort of advertisement that was put out by the army, and it was... someone using a PlayStation or an Xbox controller.
Right.
And it was like sort of inciting, if you're good at Call of Duty, you might be good at this. And it's like, where do we draw the line between like pleasure and actually harming other people?
Yeah.
Like, especially using, like, it's the element of the game.
Yeah.
It's sort of like we have instilled that in our lives, that our lives are now games.
So we kind of gamified our lives to the extent where we kind of lost the sense of, as you said, where we're actually harming or hurting people.
And I think that's quite, like a really dangerous advert to put out, because so many kids, you play Call of Duty, you don't think about any of the people that you're killing in it, because it's completely a simulation in a game. But if you're trying to relate that to using a drone to drop bombs on real people, you're saying that these lives, it's all just a game. And then you immediately, if you're relating it to that, so many kids have grown up playing these video games that it will be so easy for them to just jump on board with that idea and like completely dehumanize these areas.
There was, for the thing when I was younger was always the film and TV, to the Michael Ryan massacre. Now, I don't know about you, but how many guns do you think you've seen in films and TV? Hundreds, thousands, right? Has anyone ever pulled a gun in your presence? It's happened once, and you shit your pants. It's scary. Yeah. It's a difference, but I think that's the danger of the digital divide, the dehumanization, that it puts real world consequences in a digital vernacular, which is reduces.
So, can you tell us about the situation where someone pulled a gun?
I was in New York once.
You were in New York,
in Harlem. And this was before it got fully gentrified, and it was in a they didn't call it a corner shop, do they? A store.
And it was incredibly scary.
Yeah.
It was your life flashed before.
Shit. Yeah. It's horrible. Yeah. And because to me that it's like seeing a fight in a movie is very different from being in a fight.
Yeah.
And the argument saying that that media or any form of external stimuli triggers a response in somebody, I think I've always perceived it as naive. There needs to be some sort of pre-existing element within an individual's neurology, personality, whatever it is, that is dormant and would be triggered by something. It just happens to be that because they're the pervasive communications of the time. That's all.
interesting, isn't it? And incredibly topical, given what's just happened in the States, because in this country it's incredibly difficult to buy a firearm, but there it's not. And isn't it that on average, there's been a mass shooting every day this year, which is like counted as more than 4 people shot. Yeah. That's a mass shooting. So whilst we're not seeing a firearm every day, over there it's a completely different thing, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, as artists, media people, whatever we are, I don't know about you, Claire, so I've not really kind of like found out yet. But all the rest of these people are. Is there anything, we're talking about getting sucked into this kind of, you called it a simulacra or something like that, getting sucked into this world of images and kind of like they kind of cycle and sort of like recurring, kind of almost disappearing down the rabbit hole sort of thing that I'm feeling here. Is there anything that we can do to actually challenge or reverse this? Oh, I thought you were going to say something, but you're just.
I was going. It's just like that is the.
In you come. Sorry to interrupt. Come and have a seat. Welcome to Talkaoke. Sorry, I'm just going to put that thought on hold. Just try and sort of cycle it. I'll bring it back. I'll bring it back in a second. So we've got Rich, we've got Peter, we've got Elle, we've got Maddie, we've got Claire and Mikey. What's your name?
Abigail.
Abigail. This is Talkaoke. At the moment, we're talking about, I guess, this violent world that we live in. But some of that violence is kind of simulated, or it's TV, it's games, it's films. But some of it is actually real harmful violence, and we seem to be kind of in this world where it's all kind of blurring together, and that includes a kind of the violence of trolls and on social media, but also real genuine violence. And I just put down the question on the table: is there anything that we as artists? I'm not assuming that not assuming anything. Maybe you are, maybe you're not an artist. Everyone around the table seems to be some kind of media person. Are you? Can I ask?
I'm a administrator.
Okay. As an administrator.
She's writing that down. What do you administrate, Abigail?
Yeah. Is there anything you, as an administrator, or as a filmmaker, as a media artist, as a theatre maker, can we, I just feel like we're getting sucked into this world, and it's all terrible, but we're actually active, creative people.
Well, I think that there was a study that was done during the 70s. So it was called the Stanford Project, and basically they took 17, I think it was maybe 34 participants, and split them into 2 groups, and had one group as officers in a jail, and another group as as prisoners. Yeah, it's like it's quite a good study, but the.
Yeah. Oh, they have made a film about it.
I think it's coming out soon. Yeah. But basically, when split into both groups, they assigned themselves roles that they'd perceived on TV. They assumed roles. They assumed and learned and responded to their environment through observations, like John Wayne, or and just acted as though they were being, the victims acted victimized, even though they weren't. They were never told to act in any way.
Okay. And how did it all go?
Well, I think that there's a bit of a court case after it, but the policemen would have been abusing the prisoners, and it's sort of all got a bit.
So people just took on these roles and started abusing each other based on.
But the one thing that we can do as makers and as being part of this sort of era is to be conscious of that and not to fall into those learned personalities. Or
so the kind of default thing is to fall into the role of prisoner, prison guard, filmmaker, talk show host. We just do it without really thinking about how we do it. Got a new face to the table. What's your name? Alistair, Rich, Peter, Abigail, Elle, Maddie, Claire, and Mikey. At the moment, we're talking about the media, social media, whatever. Is it actually defining our roles, or can we define it? And it seems like you're saying we can refuse to fall in those, but it feels like the default is that we just take on the role of the prison guard, or what's your role here today?
Prison guard.
Are you the prison? Are you the prison guard? Are you the one that's? Are you calling the shots, cracking the whip? And is that just because that's what you think that is how?
Yes.
How you should be doing it. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going purely by instinct.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, is there a way to transcend that? You're saying, Maddie, yes, there is. We can actually think about it.
I think not.
You think? Who said that? Yeah.
I was just gonna. You mentioned earlier. You were like, "What's our responsibility as artists? What do we think? What can we do to make a difference?" And I believe that in my work and sort of work, when I've seen work that I believe to be of a really high standard, it's talking about what do we have in common as human beings, and where is the connection and where is the truth that about the human experience, and that's what I would hope to be looking at. And I think screen content and digital, all of these things, if it's like flashing very, very fast imagery and very, very fast content, it's like often, as you were saying earlier, like it does dehumanize you and it does make you. So hopefully what we're supposed to be doing and sometimes achieving is reminding people of their own experience, of their shared experience with other human beings,
right.
And then in finding some of that commonality, maybe we can be better people.
But what about if that shared experience with other human beings is through Facebook? Does that change what the human experience is?
Yeah, I think it does. Like,
does it create a new reality, a new experience?
Yeah, I mean, there's loads of studies at the moment, aren't there, about how people portray themselves on social media and what the actual reality is, and how that's the effect that's having on young people's psyches and well-being. And so, yes, I think it is. We want to present this image of everything's perfect and everything's shiny over here, which isn't actually the truth of the situation often.
I think one thing, like, on that kind of topic of how people present themselves, like, I know this one couple where, like, in real life, like, things are quite bad between them, and, like, things are not okay, things are not romantic, but constantly, every day on Facebook, I see the girl posting lovely comments about him or things they're doing together, and really nice things in it. I think it's almost dangerous to present this portrayal of relationships, because then you suddenly think, oh, well, if this is so perfect, like, well, I have, like, arguments, like, this must not be okay. Like, if you're only ever presenting even false truths or just the good stuff, then people start to doubt that their relationships are valid and things like that.
It's the difference between the avatar and the idealized self and the actual self, and people in the digital world make this pristine version of themselves that they can't live up to, and that can add to your, like, a failure in your own self-worth, actually, and where you're constantly documenting like all the best parts of your lives, and then it comes up in memories where you think, oh, I'm not doing that now, so you're sort of always aspiring to meet your next best, whenever actually sometimes it's actually okay to be like absolute crap, you know what I mean? Like, it's good to be like that, it's good to feel like that, and the points in which we can relate back to those times in empathy with the rest of our humanity is when we can all, when you see that video of them all singing and in the Manchester singing, like, oh, what was it? I Don't Look Back in Anger, and like everyone, I think like the whole anyone on my network was so instantly connected to it. It's that realization of our empathy and those sadnesses that we often try to reject in our pristine selves.
Right.
Sorry,
Okay.
I'm just blabbering now.
No, I mean, there's a few things here, and then I'm thinking, where do we want to go with this? Do we want to talk about the relationship between this true self and the ideal self? Do we want to talk about this question of empathy? Maybe there's like the empathy's not getting through. I think that's the implication there in media, and maybe that. Or do we want to go back to that question about what we can do, what is our stance on all of this? Because we seem to be very critical about the world we live in, but what do we actually do? Alistair, does any of this make sense to you?
Yeah, it makes sense. It's just such an all-encompassing, massive topic about everything at the moment.
One step up.
I struggle with it. I have 2 or 3 modes that I operate in, and I try my best to have my at-home mode where I can just be myself. But then in work environments, I sometimes have to suddenly put a filter on in front of me. And in the past, I've moved away from social media to some extent. I'm a voyeur of Facebook. But I don't
You don't post.
Yeah, I really don't post, and I try my best to not go on it that often. But it used to be.
Yeah.
It still used to be like. I think now I'm down to looking at it once every 3 or 4 days.
Right.
You know, it would be a quick once a day. Not that long ago. So I'm kind of I think I play a game with Facebook a little bit.
They got me with the news when they introduced news into the feed. So that because I automatically followed lots of things that and then it's an aggregator. That's all right. So that's how they got me. That's how they get me a daily check because of that.
Actual news or fake news or do you know? I think it's part of the same topic. Like going back to kind of earlier, do you know, it's sort of that world of fake news that effectively has produced the political. It produced Trump actually. Do you know, he kind of was the first person, or I think, the first president who really knew it doesn't matter what shit he throws at this machine, just as long as he keeps throwing shit at it, at all great stuff.
So it's a different relationship with reality, I suppose, is what we're talking about. And, you know, but what is our relationship with this reality? I mean, I've just heard, there's 3 different Alistairs now. There's the work one, the himself one, the at-home one, and then there's the social media.
So, isn't life like that in many dimensions anyway? That we perform in different contexts, and one of the things about social media is that it has magnified that, which can be wonderful because it means you can, as it were, have a performance in front of a large audience if that's what you're seeking. But it brings greater threats with it and risks, and I think that's one of the real issues for people is making mistakes on a very large scale, and what that can mean for you. But I think it's with us, and it's about learning to use it for better rather than.
Alistair did something very clever, which is he self-defined his various personas, which gave him a degree of control over our perception of him. I'm not saying he did it consciously, but that is what you just did. Because I agree with Abigail. Life is a series of different masks for different people. If you assume you are yourself constantly, you are constantly wrong, because you're not. You modulate to whoever you're with. Every person changes the parameters, and it changes who you are every time. You see, that's what was interesting. So Alistair gave you 3 clear, comfortable, definable roles that he fulfills. So then we all went, which one's he doing now? I guess he's doing number 2.
Yeah.
Rather than, is he being disingenuous? Is he being sincere? Is he manipulating me? Is he not? Rather than doing any of those games, you've gone, okay, he's in mode number 2. So that's safe, I can deal with that. Which social media kind of encourages, that sort of...
I mean, are you implying there, Rich, that there's not like a real Alistair, there's just 3 different modes of Alistair? Because you were
Alistair himself, just Alistair, or
the at-home Alistair was the kind of real you, but you're sort of seems to be saying that there's 3 different modes.
I think we are more in flux than is comfortable for us our notions of control, which are, in my opinion, a fallacy.
Okay, we're not in control, is that what you're saying?
No way.
Okay.
There's actually a push at the moment for the right to be forgotten, and this is like coming up in court cases where people have made big ass mistakes on Facebook or social media, and it's logged there forever and it can't be deleted, and now there's a massive press for like all around the world for the right to be forgotten, and it's like, well, in fact, maybe if we were allowed to make I think that it's because it's so permanent in a digital space that even whenever you delete your Facebook, you can come back to it a couple of months later. Like, someone always has an eye on you. But if I think if as soon as we're allowed to remove ourselves from that space, people will start going back to their daily lives without thinking that they have to rectify any sort of logged mistakes or logged issues.
Who here would like to be forgotten more?
Lots of ridiculous things I'd like to forget.
I mean,
I don't like the fact that we are. I resent the fact if we're in media, we must engage. Yeah. It's part of my job. It's part of everything. It's part of any job from anyone around here. If you wish to be successful, you have to engage. That I do resent as a thing.
Well, what's the alternative to engaging?
There isn't.
Right.
If you are functioning with any creative industry, if you accept as a norm that you need an audience of some kind, even if it's one person, and how you reach them now, the discourse is digital. Yeah. And we just sat through talks which essentially laid that out for us again. And the thing I don't like is the fact it's perpetuated the 24-hour culture.
Yeah.
The inability to disconnect. And I think that's what's, when you see all the studies about mental health, rise of mental health issues, it's that inability to disconnect, to turn off the brain. It all functions, and you can put flux and things and reduce the amount of red and blue, or white and blue light that actually does interrupt your circadian rhythms and fucks with your sleep, but still, you're still connected and you're still reasoning that through, and it's not healthy.
Yeah.
Really hilarious, actually. There's like a general consensus where anyone that works in ICT or with media really, really hates it. Like, they really, really hate the media in which they have to work, but it's just there's a love of the result, but the process can be so, like, it's for example, I worked in an office for a long time. I used to work for HMRC, and I absolutely detested it because you had to bottle all of this raw emotion that you were upsetting people with some of the things that you're chasing people for money, basically, and you have to bottle all of that emotion and keep it at a desk and speak to a computer, and so it's like we're removed from this personal touch of communication. But working in a bar, you get people actively partaking and throwing shit at you all day long, and you can take it because it's face to face, and you can instantly you can displace that in a different manner. Whereas with the reason that we suffer such stress from computers is because we take it home because we can't give it back to a machine.
Which is like what Rich was saying earlier, how like it just builds and builds, but you haven't got that sort of cathartic release.
Yeah. Okay, so we've worked out that the digital realm is not a safe realm at all, and it's full of this problem of, as Rich put it, raising the cortisol levels without the release. So it's time to get the, pencils and paintbrushes out and start from there. Or maybe, is the digital dangerous? Is it a dangerous medium, an unhealthy medium to work in?
We're so early into that digital world. We haven't worked out what it's for really yet. It's still young. All this stuff. It's like 20 years old, 25 years old. The kind of web or the kind of.
Do you think we'll overcome some of these problems?
I think so, and I think I mean, I guess it's that. For me, the kind of big thing about the web, I mean, we have all this kind of stuff around identity and stuff, but it's just the sheer bloody abundance of it all and all that kind of information that, like, you don't know what to choose or what to know or whatever
so you're
anymore.
Just overwhelmed.
Yeah, and I think the only way to kind of answer it is to kind of, well, one way people are answering it is by having those filter bubbles. So they only consume what they need. The other way is to kind of shut off.
I'm actually the manager.
Yeah, you can still come and have a seat. Are you on Facebook? That's what we're talking about at the moment.
No Facebook.
You don't do it?
No.
Why?
Sean's smart, that's why. I'm smart, that's right. I was on Facebook.
Yeah.
I changed my phone.
Yeah.
And they tried to transfer it, but it wouldn't transfer.
Right.
And then they said I had to set up a new account.
Yeah.
And had I ever had a email address? Before that, well, I couldn't remember. Yeah. So I said no.
And then you just disappeared. Yeah.
And now I can't get onto it. So I don't think that's a bad thing.
Yeah. Because we're talking about people. Are people addicted to that kind of stuff?
They are.
Yeah.
My mates forever.
Yeah.
I actually work at Left Bank.
Yeah.
And you see all these girls at the cocktail bar. Initially, it's all huggy.
Yeah.
Within 5 minutes, they're all on the phone, speaking to each other.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, why are you out together?
Yeah.
They're on to their friends that are on Facebook.
Okay, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
I think that kind of how it's changed our sense of place actually is really significant and what it means for kind of place because we're always in these kind of different places. I think it's quite interesting though. We've seen sort of the rise of the internet and this digital abundance, and we have got people going back to those more scarce kind of technologies and stuff, and vinyl records or whatever are on the rise, etc. And actually, I think it has, like, we're seeing in like music, for example, that gigs are more popular and sold than ever. So I think that digital abundance.
We're trying
and
to
the fact that
grasping
there's
at it.
too much of it.
Claire, you were actually disagreeing anyway. Sorry.
Oh, was I? What was that? Ages ago. Oh, whether we no,
Whether-
just
whether the
that like
problems
human
is-
evolution has taken a colossal amount of time, and the explosion of. I mean, of course we'll adapt because that's what we do, but it's having a huge effect. There's been like. I've just got like half-remembered factoids because we are in the era of factoids and fake news. But the pornification of culture over the last 50 years, since how pornography has become so mainstream, that the effect that's physically happening on young girls' bodies, women's bodies,
they're pornifying their bodies.
The expectation upon them, what that's doing to all of everybody's sex lives. It's like that's having a vast effect, vast and tangible effect. And the way women are viewed and spoken about, any woman in a public sphere these days, the way female politicians are abused online, the way that the aggression and the language that is used towards women because they're in a public, all of that kind of weaves back into how kind of pervasive pornography has become and how instantly accessible it is and how dehumanizing it is for everybody.
Okay, so you think we're on a path to dehumanization that we just can't get off of?
I don't think we can't get off it, but I think it is having a huge impact on us. But
Come and have a seat around the table. This is a humanising conversation in the dehumanising world. Please do. I've not swiveled round to over here yet. So we've got Peter, we've got Abigail, we've got Elle, we've got Clara. What's your name?
Emma.
I'm Mikey. At the moment we're sort of talking about, Rick's been trying to visualise some of the conversation. I think this might kind of sum it up in a way that why have you got like the notification in the mouth and the eyes and the... It's just a thing. Okay, anyway, that's basically it. We're talking about, are we being digitally dehumanised? Pornified, pornified.
She's taking 10 likes in her mouth. There you go.
And is there any way, what's our relationship? There's a lot of artists and an administrator around the table. What is our role here? Do we just comment on it? Is there anything we can do? Claire's just brought up this point about pornification, that our world is becoming pornified. A lot of it has been about this idea that our reality is shaped actually by the media, and it's not actually kind of, so the sounds of the forest or the woodland are actually the sounds that we expect to hear from the programs that we've seen. And then if you film it without those sounds, people go, that's not proper jungle.
What do I mean by pornified? Well, as I was just saying, I've only half remembered the factoids that I've ingested, but basically they've kind of done a whole load of studies, and since pornography has become more and more mainstream and more accessible, you can kind of track how it's impacting on how women are represented in society, how women are responded to. I was just talking about kind of all the trolling abuse that female politicians get, and how often very sexually oriented that and offensive, and people being threatened to be raped, because they're the MP for Ballionsben or whatever. But also that there's a sort of like physical, tangible register on sort of the increase in young girls having physical surgery because their bodies don't look like how they've seen in porn films, or how their boyfriends are expecting to encounter them. A friend of mine told me this story. This is too much information. A friend of mine told the story the other day that she works with somebody who works in a gynecological department, and they can tell whether a woman is under 30 or not by how much pubic hair she will have, because there's an expectation because of the imagery that they have received about what your body should look like. So that's what I mean by the pornification of culture.
Yeah, so there's a strong influence
Did that come in today at all with anything? I've missed a link here. Is there something about...
No, this is just where the conversation's gone. I don't think there's been any examples in the work that we've seen today where things have been apart from probably the image that Rick's made, slightly pornified of But then again, Rick's following the conversation. So, but this is, like how the media affects our reality and creates our reality in a way and paints it in a certain way and creates these expectations, including the pornification of our world. Do people agree? That word, yeah.
Like a related note to that and to what has been going on today, like virtual reality, it has been released that pornography is going to be, they've created virtual reality pornography where you can actually, you're put on the headset and you're in it, which is even more dangerous because watching it, you're slightly detached from these expectations, unrealistic expectations. But then if you're being put in that situation, like real life sex is never going to be the same again.
Where do the expectations of pornography come from? What are they? What actually paints and illustrates those expectations, and how do they actually? How do they actually pervade into the world? And, what's going on? What's the thinking or lack of thinking that's happening there? Is that too tough a question?
Ask us the question again.
Well, it's just like people are talking about these expectations, that unrealistic expectations. You said, Elle, but where does that actually come from, and why is it an expectation, and what is kind of like driving that unrealism?
Lack of relationship with the things that we're experiencing, or a lack of depth of relationship with the things we're experiencing?
So a kind of superficiality.
And then when you see anything in film, they just lovingly throw them onto the bed. That doesn't happen. It's not graceful. We're, as humans, we're clumsy, and in film, not pornographic film, but film, in a romance film, they go in for the kiss and everything's always idolized and perfect, but that's not what things are like. We aren't graceful beings.
Okay, so there's is that the same thing as the kind of the filmic kind of gracefulness being added? Is that the same as what you're talking about, Claire, and about the online abuse? Is it part of a pornification, or is that I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah.
No, I don't know.
Emma?
I'm really sorry, but I feel like I've come in on a conversation. I don't know what we're talking about pornography. I keep thinking about today. I keep thinking about today, and then I'm thinking about we've seen quite a lot of VR activity, and I don't know where we're going.
Well, I tell you what I'll do is I'll rewind and go for the conversation. How we've gone so far. So we started off talking about what do we start off talking about? Film. That's Rick. That's Rick back there. So we started off talking about film. We had a lot of filmmakers around the table, and the question came up, well, as a filmmaker, you actually see film differently. Because you're an editor, you're a camera person, you actually see the way that's made differently. And then we sort of talked about how our reality is actually then shaped by what we see in the media. And that's where we've come onto this idea of pornification, because, hello, come and take a seat. Yeah, we're talking about, the violence as well,
Violence, and how that has come through the media and into reality, and then we're kind of riffing on loads of stuff.
So that's where we've come to pornification.
Thank you, that's all I do.
So that's where we are really, but I don't know, it's kind of up to you. The whole point of Talkaoke is up to you. It's up to you to decide where this conversation goes. You came up with the pornification thing. But no, I think.
But it's an elephant in the room. It's like we're talking about. That's the isn't it the largest amount of content on the web? That's like the most searched for thing. It's like there's a huge amount of it out there.
On the topic of like you were saying, like women being sort of devalued, I suppose. Like I keep hearing. Whenever you're being like a leader as a woman, I keep hearing bossy, and I've always heard bossy throughout my life. And it always makes me always just want to be passive about things, and I never want to put my ideas across now. And I find more and more now, like I don't want to run things, and I don't want to lead. I want to be told what to do, because otherwise I get labelled as bossy, and that's so negative. And I've started noticing it more and more, because.
Hang on.
bossy, and it's outrageous. I'm called bossy all the time
Yeah.
because I'm decisive, I'm articulate, I think.
It's awful because like my boyfriend has his own business and he always asks like, oh, would I ever be? I'm like, no, I want to be told what to do, because if I try and lead things, I always get such harsh sort of like vocabulary thrown at me. Like I always feel like I shouldn't speak out.
This should be stuffed out at school. That should be the purpose of a school, is to send people off in an equitable situation, male and female. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, once more, it comes down to this idea that the media reality, is kind of shaping our expectations and understanding.
Having anal sex in real relationships as a result of pornography. And it's a big issue in a school I worked with about a year ago, that was a very, very big issue for the kids at the school. Is there was an expectation that would happen, which is fine if it's consensual, but if it's not, then there is an issue there. So that's sort of...
very direct result, yeah.
I mean, is there anything we as... I'll go back to the same question. We're medium... Come and get involved. Come and have a seat on the table. We're talking about... Is there anything we can do to stop the kids having... We're trying... we're not trying to stop the kids from having anal sex. We're just trying to reset the dial of... where their reality, how their reality is constructed. That's it. We're not being, censorial, but at the same time, we're worried that actually people's realities are so much constructed by this media wash that comes over them.
No, they're experiencing pornography without the relationship attached to it. So there's no conversation, there's no negotiation, there's no intimacy. Yeah, it's...
Claire, what are you saying?
Well, I was just going to pick up on what you were saying about bossy women, and just last year, sort of Hillary Clinton's defeat in the American election, just the way she was so torn down, and some people relished the tearing down of her publicly. And how she's been pilloried for, when actually, she was obviously the most qualified candidate, has been the most qualified candidate to be a president for a very long time, actually, but she dared to be a woman and to not toe the line. And it's like having positive role models is so important, but then what do we do to those positive role models? There was no answer there. That was just a general view.
So they were just throwing in Hillary Clinton into the. Was she also, was she also the victim of this misogynist culture we're talking about? And is there a connection with that and the pornification? Is it all part of the same thing? That's what we're talking about now, I suppose. Hillary Clinton, any views on this side?
It was connected, but I do think what you've said is a real issue. I think it's a real crying shame
about women not being allowed to be assertive, taking decisions. That kind
when
of
have you ever called a man bossy?
You've even got that phrase "bossy boots" because women would wear high boots.
Yeah.
It feels like
bossy boots sounds like a female rather than a male.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's the same with anything. Like if a woman slept with a lot of people, she's a slut, she's a whore. But if a man does, he's a player. It's the same sort of concept. Like women can't do things that these men can do.
Yeah. And who's kind of setting the parameters for this?
And it seems to just be like.
A lot of it's in language. People think I absolutely fail to have any sense of humour, which I probably do fail to have, because I won't tolerate things like that. People are not allowed to call me bossy.
That's quite bossy, isn't it?
Well, it's being decisive
but, is
about
it,
something.
And that I guess calls into the...
Because I think language is quite, powerful.
It calls into the question is, how do we challenge this? How do we actually move the conversation on and move the expectation on?
Talking about it is one thing, and to raise people's awareness, because I think a lot of people are misogynistic without actually realising they are, and I think if you held up the mirror to them, they would maybe at some point recognise that that's what they're doing. I think some people don't like women who are the main earners in the house. I think all of this is a problem for people.
How do you hold it? Oh, yeah, Peter.
I was just I haven't been saying much because I don't feel that should be, but I think a lot of it as well in turn, I think talking about it's important, but in order to talk about it, actually we need to deal with the representation issues that we do have in our media industries, in our creative tech industries we've just seen recently. Do you know, actually this is part of the kind of issue, I think, is that like representation. And actually looking at female film, how many female film directors are there right now, earning or working in the kind of Hollywood system or in the British system, and problems with that.
There was a really good event in London, I think last week actually, and it was a lot of VFX companies around. Had this it was a careers event kind of thing, and it was solely based on getting more women into the industry, which I think is a really good way to go about it. Whereas I know companies such as Intel had a different view on how to go about it, which wasn't the best, and they were at a point where they only were hiring women, which I think was becoming discriminative the other way, because if you're only going to hire women, they might not necessarily be the better one for the job. There might be a man who was better for the job than the one you hired. So you can't be discriminative either way. But it's trying to pull back from and trying to push for more women to get into the industry.
Sorry, hang on a second, Emma, because we've got a couple of new faces to the table. What's your name?
My name's Dan.
And?
Grant.
We have got Elle, we've got Abigail, we have got Peter and Emma and Claire, and I'm Mikey. At the moment we're talking about a kind of global mediatized misogyny that people have identified around the table. What to do about it? Is it about, as Peter says, more women taking powerful roles in film, such as being a director? Is it about companies encouraging women to actually take these roles? And there's a few suggestions, and maybe you've got some yourself, but that's where we are with the conversation right now. But who knows which in any way it will go on to. But Dan, you kind of sat down at one point. Have you got? You've been listening to the conversation, so you've kind of got a step up from Grant, who's just walked in.
Yeah.
Have you got a view at this point, or do you want to?
The reason I sat down was because I was quite interested in the way the conversation was going. It's, I'm picking up on the point of language. I think that one of the biggest issues we have, or maybe one of the biggest issues that's coming out, is really how people think about themselves and how that language defines who they are.
Right.
And
it's interesting you use the term holding up the mirror, which kind of talks about yourself.
But the mirror is more, but it's so much deeper than that in a way, because it's really. It's about how people at a very young age are identifying and building their own identities, and what those roles entail, and how that mirror works, I guess. I've been aware of gender issues for many years in previous occupations, but really just now I have a daughter, and so for the first time, I'm having to make an awful lot of choices about things, and I've become sort of hyper aware, I guess, of gender roles, sexualized roles. And so you're trying to navigate this minefield.
Do you feel your daughter's kind of being influenced by that, and she's actually kind of distorting?
As a parent, actually, I feel a bit like there's this sort of tirade and sort of swamp of stuff, this sort of ocean of stuff that I'm trying to sort of navigate and moderate and filter, and it comes from every direction. Shoe manufacturers, clothing, toys, advertising on the TV. It's just I feel like I'm there sort of trying to deflect this stuff, and you just can't. And so it's like trying to find other strategies of how am I gonna bolster her view of herself as a woman,
Okay.
In terms of men.
Okay.
And how you give her the ability to kind of critically read that herself, because I think that's what, because I face the same problem with children, and I think there's but they can be very acute critical readers of the media that they consume if you give them that kind of help to understand and to question, to interpret. That's why I think education is so important. Where we can kind of develop that confidence to kind of not take everything literally, as it were.
I agree.
and I think as they get older, definitely, but I think it's from such a young age that, you know, it's clearly, you know, Lego isn't Lego anymore. There's girls Lego and Lego. Yeah. There's like, you know, what a shoe choice, like trying to buy a sensible pair of shoes that your female child can run in is actually like really difficult. Right. That has proper straps or, but you know, and isn't pink. Just stuff that it's so pervasive now. It's like it's exhausting. I empathise with you greatly. But also the language that we use to talk to children, to talk to girls and boys, to talk about themselves. Bossy boots, or like, you know, what's his name? They've got Mitchell and Webb. He just had that book. I haven't read it.
No, the other guy. What's it called? Not David Mitchell. Robert Webb.
Yeah, so he's just written a book about his experience of that. So I really want to read it. It sounds really interesting. But like, you know, it actually works both ways. We focus a lot at the moment on girls, but also like how we talk to boys about how they can express emotion and how it's okay to feel stuff and not have to bottle it up and express it only as anger.
To see your dad cry, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, that's or articulate their feelings. So there you go. That's the best way.
Okay. So
bring out a softer side in people.
Okay. So, Grant, anything?
Yeah, I suppose my point of view, I've got a 2-year-old boy, and so it's really interesting conversation because coming at it from the father of a son, it's exactly those things you're talking about, which is actually, and we've got another one due in Jan, so that the conversations that people say to us now is, it's going to be cheaper when if you have another boy. We don't know what we're having. As if to say you've got to change the entire way you look and approach clothes-wise, because if you have a boy, they can wear the same stuff. If you have a girl, you've got to buy everything pink, and that's how people. Even those conversations to you at that point, people are before they're even here. People are dictating the way you're going to approach them before they've got here, and my response is always the same. They're going to be wearing the same clothes no matter what, because we want the same money. So I don't boy or girl. They're wearing Toby's shoes, they're wearing Toby's clothes, it doesn't make a difference to us. But then you start thinking, well, does that mean that we've got really boyish stuff at the moment? I completely agree. It's much harder to be the father of a young girl than it is of a young boy, and I see that kind of already.
I mean, there is also the question, and I think you were talking about it, you know, the book by Robert Webb about boys. I mean, I don't know, to me it seems that all the conversation seems to be about sort of being kind of awash with all these expectations and, you know, having to fight them somehow and sort of fend it off, and boys and girls. So, you know, it just, to me, I don't have kids myself, but it seems like a...
When I was pregnant with my daughter, I was convinced I was pregnant with a boy.
Yeah.
And I genuinely didn't mind either way, but when I found out that she was a girl, I cried. Yeah. And not because I didn't want a girl, but I am a woman, and like, it's it's hard fucking work. I mean, it's just negotiate. It's knowing that for her whole of her life, she will have to negotiate now. Yeah. Wanted attention, unwanted attention, like.
For blokes, so I've got 2 girls and a boy, and I think my boy is going to have a harder time.
What are the difficulties for boys?
He's going to have a harder time because his dad's not at home, so he hasn't got an immediate role model. I think he'll have a harder time because I think that in terms of mental health, my daughters have got much better ability of processing things. They're emotionally going to be able to express themselves, understand themselves, and I think it's. Maybe it's particularly to do with my son, but I think for him that'll probably be his biggest challenge, is knowing where he fits in. If it's not going to be very, very male, then where's he going to sit himself? Whereas I feel like my daughters have got quite good range of female role models.
Okay, so there's the question about emotional expression. Sorry. You're going to hear a big scream in the distance, like and it's like, I feel much better now. You can cry around the table, Grant. This is a safe space.
It's hard, like, on that whole topic of sort of the stereotypes surrounding a girl and a boy.
Yeah.
And if you don't fit into those boxes, it starts to make you question, like, I do wear a lot of male clothing, and I like video games, which people say, like, is more of a boy thing.
Yeah.
So it makes you doubt, like, am I feminine?
Yeah.
And so, like, it makes it really hard, like, because the world loves to put things in boxes, because if you're in a box, you can understand it, and it's not threatening anymore. And if you put, like, a label on someone, they're no longer a mystery to you. And, like, as humans, we hate the idea of the unknown. That's why we have the idea of God and why we must travel into space, because we can't have an unknown. We need to know why things work. So you have to put labels and boxes on people, but we're so much more complex in that, and that just causes itself more issues.
Yeah. So basically, there's a strong expectation, and if we don't fit into that, and inevitably we won't fit into, maybe one or two people will be exactly what a girl's supposed to be or a boy's supposed to be, but all these other people feel like they're not quite it. You sort of inhaled, Dan, as if you were going to say something.
And then I just thought.
Was it self-editing?
It was a bit of self-editing.
Yeah. Could you say it in a different way?
I don't know, because I thought, I sort of felt, maybe sort of 10 years ago, I felt like, we moved a long way as a society and things are really changing. And that there was sort of this natural progression towards this maybe more sort of left-wing or more understanding perspective. And I guess, I don't know, maybe post-2008, maybe with the pressure that's placed on everyone by crunching finances, I sort of feel like we're having to work very hard just to maybe stand still. And I don't know. I don't think we are going backwards. I think we're still sort of moving forward. So I think I just feel like there's probably more work in keeping the momentum going. Yeah. It seems like there's more resistance to it. Yeah. It seems like the things that maybe the values that I was brought up with, that I really sort of felt were just innate, and that these things were just, solid values. And now sort of like, well, actually, maybe not. Maybe it's okay just to pay men more than women. Maybe it's just okay to just be discriminatory.
So you thought these things would gradually kind of like disappear as
well,
time
I guess
went
my upbringing probably wasn't that standard, I guess. Both my parents are fairly left wing. Like my mother was a nurse, my dad was a social worker. Within our own bubble, it was very, very sort of about like we would discuss things over dinner every night. We'd have a topic, and there'd be lots of debate, lots of conversation. But it wasn't just that. I think that I think really probably after I graduated and after I sort of working. I think there was a political shift. I think probably after Labour, after the Iraq War, the sort of back into a conservative government and things, the demise of Quangos, this sort of general fear and right-wing, it's sort of a regressive look, isn't it? It's like when you're uncertain about the future, or you're not quite sure what to do, because there's all these new challenges, it's about whether you decide to look backwards and you retreat into this thing you think is a safe space, or whether you're prepared to look forward and try and make something that's new or better. And I just feel like on a sort of the zeitgeist for a while we're coming out
backwards.
No, I think we're coming out of it now, but I think for the last maybe 5 years we've been looking backwards, and only now do I feel like we're starting to get to a place where things are looking forwards, but that might just be me. I don't know.
It's definitely talked about more, because like I mean maybe because I was too young to have maybe heard about it when 10 years ago, but I never heard much about sort of like transgendered people when I was younger, and more it's becoming talked about that like gender identity and sexual identity is so diverse. I don't know if that's true or not, but like I'd say 10 years ago it wasn't as apparent, and now it is. And so I think starting just the conversations and is like a way towards the acceptance and like realization that
So we are kind of moving forward when it comes to the... Are you off, Peter? You've been here for a while. Give us a final thought before you go.
I mean, I guess sort of... I think that we've been talking a lot. We started off obviously talking about technology, mediation, presentation or whatever, and I think we've moved on to kind of language, and actually the language is a technology too, and language isn't Do you know, it isn't. It does have biases, etc., etc. And I think that the thing is, we just need to be critical. We need to have these conversations. I don't know. Maybe artists need to be doing more stuff with porn, or we need to create a kind of porn that is. I don't know. I don't know. But is that the answer? I don't know. It's
that could be a
tricky one.
A good
really.
Talkaoke subject. Like, how do we make a
what
would
progressive porn look like? I don't know. Or is it one of those things that is kind of progressive?
Yeah.
Or regressive. Yeah. I think it's just having these conversations.
Yes.
I
mean, do you
being
sort of agree with
critical
Elle
and as has been coming up quite a lot, it's about literacy, and it's about kind of, it's about a new digital literacy actually.
He's off. He's just given his final thought.
Yeah,
He's coming.
Doing that from a young age, and I think there's been some really good points about that.
I mean, these conversations are happening. All right, okay. So our visualizer's gone off. I'll just quickly point out this is the gorilla kind of learning how to be a gorilla by watching Jungle Book. Although actually, I don't think there are any gorillas in Jungle Book. But right, Rick's gone. I don't want to be pedantic about this. So, you heard it. Damn. Okay, right. So, I mean, where do we want to take this conversation? Do we want to talk about a more progressive form of pornography? Do we want to talk about the gender roles? Are we actually moving forward because at least we're having the discussion now, or are we being pushed back by a torrent of pink stuff and glittery, pink, girly kind of, whatever it is, kind of heteronormative?
Something that, sorry, is it Al? Yeah, so it kind of cycled back round, didn't it? And actually I think kind of differing identities and sexualities are probably more visible because of social media and kind of 24-hour news culture and so maybe that's a positive or a negative depending on where you stand on the subject, but it is a kind of
probably both, I would say.
Right.
Not that I'm supposed to be giving my opinion, but maybe it is a bit of both. But actually, are we starting to and certainly from my point of view, I drive around Rick's driving the van now, but drive around the van, having conversations all around the country, if not further afield. And certainly the conversation about the construction of gender, and we were in a school earlier this year, and there's some 11-year-old kids having this conversation and talking about, a very critical perspective on expected gender roles and what it means and where they wanted to fit into it. So that conversation probably wouldn't be happening 10 years ago. Not on my Talkaoke table anyway. Maybe it's me. I don't know, but so maybe we are moving forward in that sense.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say something.
It's totally different because there was another conversation we've been having about technology. Yeah. And I guess also it's a problematic conversation because it was sort of algorithmic based, and it's really all about how we're sort of siloing our own perspectives, whereby through algorithms, there's a great podcast about it. Last week, 99p, I did one. Sorry, not 99p. Benjamin Walker, Theory of Everything. He's an NPR podcaster. Yeah. And he did a really interesting one about the algorithm, the problem with the algorithms, and how we have these algorithms that are driving social media, and that these algorithms are designed to show us what we want to see, and they're based upon what we've seen. It's all stuff we know about. But the net result is that we all develop very siloed worldviews with our communities of interest. So we have all these people telling us that our worldview is the right worldview, and we're seeing all this evidence that's designed to support it, but totally different to somebody else's search history or worldview. And we have these sort of diverging perspectives. And for me, I find that particularly interesting because sort of philosophically, I guess that I always believe that the internet was a tool for bringing people together to talk about each other, to share ideas, to sort of challenge differences. And I guess the problem with these algorithms is that they don't do that. What they do is they show you one thing, they show me something totally different, and they then get us sort of. It's about sort of dividing perspective, and not for the good of humanity. It's about dividing perspective just so they can sell us stuff, just so that they can pitch us with the right adverts we can target in those boxes. And so there's a sort of dystopian perspective, I think, in social media that I find a little bit concerning.
Okay.
But yeah.
So in a way, some of these we were talking, these really good discussions are happening, but the audience is getting smaller and smaller because it's just the... Well, you can bring. Don't be scared. Don't be scared to bring some drinks. That's coming in the next version. But we need drinks. So I mean, a double espresso, a lager, whatever. I don't mind.
But the interesting thing though is that these, I think that's coming from our generation. Well, our algorithms are scary because it comes from a place of when we discover that we're like, holy shit, people selling us stuff. But actually, the next generation probably have knowledge of that. And so then they're going to use, they can use it, and they all have a self-awareness. So I don't think we should be afraid of it. I don't think it's creating this dystopia.
So in a way, you're saying that they're a bit more literate.
Yeah, and I think algorithm. I think we've got to be careful not to step into the fear of the older generation because it's new. And actually, it's about going. God, algorithms are pretty cool, and like the speech today, let's use them in the right way. And then let's teach our young people to use them in the right and be aware of the media messages. Because sometimes when I'm buying baby stuff, I want to know what other prams there are going, and I don't mind I'm one of these people that kind of
having stuff
I don't mind because as long I've got the faith in myself that I've got the self-awareness that I'm being sold stuff. So I kind of feel like it's not such a bad thing. It's not the worst thing. It's actually an awareness. If I'm aware that I know what's happening, they've got my data, they're pitching me, oh my god, but it's like that we go to this default, especially kind of I'd say my generation up. Of going, these fuckers are selling us stuff. And it's like, I don't think we need to. I don't think we need to have that fear necessarily.
Just say, well, it's personalised content, and that's rather good, actually, because as you say, it's playing into my interests. And, if I go online, it'll show me, I'll find out about books and articles that I'm interested in because it'll throw up. But it does mean you have to be very consciously aware of that, and therefore you have to be actively curious to find other perspectives. And what you can kid yourself in is that you're finding out what's going on by going onto a stream or something, and you're not.
Do you actively find other perspectives?
Well,
and how do you do that?
By very deliberately going to follow people who I disagree with.
Right.
And then you become. But you really have to work at it because most of your world is a reinforced bubble, and that's not all negative, but it is if that's the only world you live in.
You can get a benign version of that just by doing something which is about pure consumption. So Netflix. My wife's complaining. Where's all the films? You got all the films on your feed. I've just got TV. Why have I only got TV? I said that's because you're only watching TV. So what do you mean? I said the algorithm is. Said that you like this, and this, and it's serving you the same stuff. So what you need to do is search for some really out there piece of filmmaking and just watch it, and then it'll reshuffle your selection. And I think that is a metaphor for everything on social media. And I agree with Grant to the extent that it's this generation's TV, or the previous generation's film, or the previous generation's comic books. Or books even, if you go back far enough. Do you agree
that Grant's implying that those young people are more literate in it?
I think it's very naive of the older generations to assume that we can predict a skill set or an outlook predicated on a technology that came into being while we were alive. They've come into a world from the get-go. It's so if you take the metaphor that sort of cognitive development is like being dumped in a car. When you're a baby, you're dumped in a world you don't know how to operate. It's like being dumped in a car without knowing what to do with it. It'll take you a long time to work out how to drive the car. It's the same thing, except in this car, there's social media activity everywhere. And so I think there's a protective instinct, I certainly have, for trying to police what they're consumed and protect them as you would in the real world. But equally, you have to be careful of allowing them to have enough experience to police themselves and to be able to protect themselves. So it's resilience versus parenting in a way.
We're getting into parenting.
No. That's what it all seems to do.
But it's interesting, but that's true. And I suppose, just kind of being devil's advocate, to my own point, I don't have, I suppose, old enough children that are getting to that age where you have to be aware of it.
Son's not on iPad
well, actually, be surprised how good he is on the iPhone too. But so I suppose that kind of change, you probably have more curious children where I'm not there yet. So just as a aside.
Side is it is amazing. I mean, if I go home and my 12-year-old is doing an animation And he just has this equipment in his phone to create.
Right. So he's making an animation on his phone.
Yeah, which is, you know, so it is a wonderful resource as well. We've become very negative in this conversation about digital. Yes.
Don't get me wrong. I use. I mean, I'm not a digital native. I had to sort of work at it, but I've got more and more in social media, and I certainly am on the internet a lot. You know, I love my computers. I'm always editing, always working on stuff. No, I think it is probably a sort of culture shift coming from a sort of era of the idea of journalism, the idea of cultural elite, and information being filtered sort of to everyone, and there being this idea of no bias, even though there always was, through to a place where I just think we need to be really aware of it, and there needs to be checks and balances, because these networks are so. They're very positive and they bring a lot of good stuff, but they are so influential. If there are no sort of controls, or if there are no balances, then the danger is you end up with things like
do you miss
Brexit,
the cultural elite?
Sorry?
Do you miss the cultural elite that have disappeared?
No. I think that it was always, it's always been very problematic. Whether you're talking about documentary photography in sort of the British Empire, and in the way that we convinced people that they were lesser in some way. Right. That's still going on now with women, with transgender groups, with lots of people.
Yeah. So
it can be a force for good.
Everything cyclical is the thing, and all that's kind of happened is that the written word is now taken on the same properties as the spoken word prior to the written word, prior to the printing press. Right. Where information was curated initially because not everyone had access to the ability to create it, to write, to make print, all of those things. Whereas now, everything you heard from Chinese whispers kind of mentality, that's now transferred to the so-called written word because of through digital pervasiveness. Right. So the rise of the blog, the opinion, not fake news, opinion as news, unsubstantiated statements. So the reliability that we had come to and the authority we had placed on the written word is now being eroded. Yeah. So but what that does also give is perhaps removes an illusion of, it breaks down prescribed truths. Does that make sense? Yeah. Histories, the winner writes the history books. That isn't the case anymore. Yeah. So again, to not be inherently negative, but equally, but
is there anything
you have to you have to learn to assess it yourself. You have to be a better critical thinker perhaps now than you had to be 25 years ago, because otherwise how are you going to discern what is truth, which is a subjective thing anyway. When people say truth, fact is different from truth, and what sources you get it from. Yeah,
there's quite a lot of concepts you're throwing into the mix there, and it's kind of up to you which ones you want to pick out of there and which ones you want to just let fall onto the ground. Because you only really go with one thing or a few things at the same time. Do we want to sort of go on to this question of truth and facts? Do we want to talk about this idea that the media, that the authority of the media has disappeared? Do we want to talk about this idea of...
I'm supposed to be at work right now, so I better get on and
give us a final thought before you go.
The internet is fundamentally, I believe the internet is a force for good. I just wonder what a collection of social media would look like if it wasn't driven for commercial gain. Yeah. You know, what would our world look like if all those networks weren't about trying to sell you stuff?
What do you think it would look like?
I think it could be such an amazing force for good, for balance, for questioning, for understanding, you know, I think that actually trying to sell people stuff and then trying to target and categorize sort of do inherently then create this sort of divergent state where you're trying to separate people. You know,
Linux products then stop buying Apple.
Yeah. Okay.
I have no response to that. It's too hard.
We can potentially change the algorithms. We need this kind of algorithmic literacy that Grant was saying. Claire, you've not said much on this side of the table.
I think I need a cup of tea. I'm flagging. So.
Well, maybe we can. Maybe we should just. Yeah. I mean, maybe we should just like just calm this down for a minute and maybe get some final thoughts, and we can all go and look for tea. There should actually be teas and coffees and stuff, I think, in here. I was trying to persuade Emma to actually bring some, but she just went off. But maybe she'll come back. I don't know. Maybe I need to have more hope. But anyway, maybe let's get some final thoughts for this particular session. So Claire, have you got a final thought? I mean, could be anything. It could be what you think of what has been said. Is anything stuck in your mind? Is there anything that we haven't talked about that maybe we could investigate in the next session?
No, I think I'm hopeful, actually, just thinking about all the vast amount of topics that we've talked about today, and this idea of we need to take responsibility and kind of negotiate our way through it. There's lots of potential positive things that can come out of our use of digital technology, and not to be afraid, and yeah, that'll do. Yeah. I know I desperately need a cup of tea. I'm not making any sense anymore.
Okay. Well, making a lot of sense to me. Even though, so what you'll be like with the tea, I'm scared.
As a final note, I think definitely like the most powerful weapon and the most powerful tool for change is definitely word. Like we just talking about something and just addressing it is definitely the first step to like a resolution. So just talking about the issues and recognizing that we still have got misogyny in society and we still aren't accepting of all genders and all sexualities. I think that's like the first step to making an actual change.
Okay, so kind of name the issue, name the problem, and then you can deal with it. Abigail, have you got a final thought?
I'd share your optimistic outlook, but I think it's a sharp reminder to me to hear you talk about your own experience of leadership and concern about that. That sometimes in my own bubble I can have not experienced things directly that are much worse in other areas. So that having an awareness that perhaps there's more to be done on some fronts. Yeah, because I do think sometimes you think if everything's kind of all right in your immediate sphere, you think then it's cool, and it's when you don't hear what's really happening out there. It's a silo effect. Final thought, Rich?
I'm gonna. Oh,
okay.
No, do you want to go, Claire? Because my final thought is I'm gonna toe the party line and say, clearly, this just shows the importance of us learning to express ourselves in the digital space.
Well, what I was going to say is that I've actually found this so useful to sit around a table and talk to some people and see, people from different walks of life and hear their experiences and thoughts on stuff, rather than it just being text in a digital format or a recorded image in a digital format. Like, there's still great power to flesh and blood in a room.
It's very interesting. We were talking about abuse earlier, and I find I still am quite shocked tonally by what people will write. And in a long time ago, in a very different role, I had responsibility for dealing with complaints, and I found that if someone had written something really abusive about the organisation I was working for, if I rang them up, they were completely floored, because suddenly a human being had rung them up, and they had to actually engage in a conversation. And there is something very dangerous, I think, about the way people are unaware of or do not think about the impact of their communication side out there.
Yeah, it's just like blah. All food for thought for the next one. Let's go and get teas and coffees and cakes and snakes and cakes and snacks, not cakes and snakes. Okay, so thanks very much. Thanks everyone for taking part. We'll be back a bit later on, post coffee.